Hearing close in the forest you'll find a fabulous banquet, a fairy ball. If you close your eyes and you open your mind, the veil disappears and you'll see it all.
Hi my angels, it's Hailey Reese, and for today's video we are finally going to be diving into the incredibly frustrating disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Now I have done, even prior to considering making this video, extensive research into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. I have watched countless documentaries on it, numerous interviews, and I can truly say this case has me so frustrated. It has me theorizing on so many different things, and this case is just very, very difficult to pinpoint what could have happened to Madeleine McCann, as there were so many strange things leading up to her disappearance that took place, and they really just point in so many different directions. So with that being said, for today's video, I'm going to share with you guys the moments leading up to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, some of the different theories that have been created over time and really talked about, and then hopefully by the end of it, maybe you will have some sort of opinion or thoughts on where Madeleine McCann may be or what you believe may have happened. For those of you who are not new to my channel, you guys know that this is not my usual background. I typically have a magical fairy forest behind me, but due to the seriousness of these unsolved cases, I figured for this particular series I would switch up the background and kind of give a more appropriate vibe as to the content that we are talking about and investigating into. So I hope that you guys like it. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you like this change of scenery. But without further ado, let's get into this case, because like I said, there are so many things to talk about. I probably won't even scrape the surface on everything, but I've really tried to narrow down the most important pieces of the timeline and the key elements as to the moments leading up to her disappearance and the moments after. Now, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann happened on May 3rd, 2007 in Portugal, sparking what many called the most heavily reported missing persons cases in modern history. Like, when I tell you guys this took over the media, it completely took over the media. It was so incredibly reported, and right off the bat, everybody had their 2 cents to put in, and so many theories arose. Nearly 11 years later, the whereabouts of Madeleine McCann still remains an entire mystery. However, the theories surrounding what may have happened to Madeleine McCann are very much still talked about. So Madeleine McCann was born on May 12, 2003 in England, and is the oldest daughter of Jerry and Kate McCann. Madeleine had twin 2-year-old siblings, so they were 2 years old and they were twins at the time of her disappearance. So on April 28, 2007, when Madeleine McCann was just 3 years old, the McCann family went to Praia da Luz, Portugal for a week vacation. I really hope I pronounced that right, but it was in Portugal and they were heading there for a week's vacation. They were staying at the Luz Ocean Club in a 2-story ground level apartment, so this wasn't really like a hotel, it was more of like a rent an apartment for the week. However, it did have like a pool and a nice restaurant. It had those resort amenities, but you rented from the exact owners of these apartments, so to speak. So on this vacation, the McCanns were joined by 7 of their friends, and they also brought along their children on this trip. So there were plenty of them on this trip. Now, for the start of their vacation, the McCanns and their friends had a very strict schedule that they followed as far as the children's bedtime and their adult dinner. And what I mean by this is at 8 p.m. every night, they would all put their children to sleep in their apartments, and they would meet up at the Tapas Bar and Restaurant 180 feet away from where their children slept, where they would have an adult dinner. So ultimately, they would all leave their kids sleeping in their apartments and they would head over to this place to meet up and have dinner. Now, they had a specific table that they would always occupy when they would go for this dinner because they weren't able to see the apartments from this table. However, what I mean by see is they were able to see the apartments, but to really see the doors and to see if somebody is really up there, it was difficult it was pretty difficult to see. So they were seeing, but they weren't really seeing. However, I think it just gave them that reassurance of knowing that from this specific table, they did have some sort of sights on the apartment. So they would each take shifts every 20 to 30 minutes and go and check on the children to make sure that the children were okay. However, one thing that they had started to do, because they felt the front door and unlocking the front door was too loud, was that they would actually leave the patio doors unlocked. And the reason that they would leave them unlocked is because they could only lock from the inside, but they felt as though going through the front door that had to be unlocked and locked each time was quite loud and was ultimately waking up their children. So they would leave their sleeping children alone in these apartments with the patio doors unlocked, and that's how they would each take these shifts, going and checking on each other's children or just their own children. It really just depended on what the rounds were at that time. Now, one thing I really want to talk about this is I am not a judgmental person, especially when it comes to people's parenting styles, because I don't have children, so I really can't speak on the type of parent that I would be. And I also think that everybody is, no matter how wrong you think things are, they are entitled to parent their children how they deem best. But with that being said, it really astonishes me that the McCanns left sleeping 2-year-old twins and a sleeping 3-year-old daughter alone in an apartment with an unlocked patio door each night. I mean, even if you are checking on them every 20 to 30 minutes, it's still 2 2-year-old children and a 3-year-old child alone for every 20 to 30 minutes. And I don't know about you guys, but I nannied, and I was continuously checking the baby monitor when he was sleeping, because you just never know, especially at that age. So I feel as though you should not be leaving your small children alone until they are at an age of self-sufficiency. And what I mean by this is, like, if something were to happen to the twins, Madeleine's not at the age of self-sufficiency to know what to do and to problem solve. So to me, that whole entire arrangement they had going on was a really, really irresponsible thing from the start. But then again, I mean, people make choices for their children that they think are best fitting. So I mean, I don't know what else I can really say about that. So this went on for a couple of days, no problems. They would go, they would enjoy their dinner, they would have their bottles of wine, they would take turns checking on their children, and everything seemed to be okay. That was until May 3rd, 2007, just a couple days into their vacation. Now, the entire day seemed to be very normal. Madeleine spent some time at the pool with her family. This right here is actually the final photograph of Madeleine McCann alive. I will insert that here, but the whole day just kind of went as every day prior had went as well. And at 8:30 p.m., the McCanns and their friends went on their adult dinner as they usually did, leaving their children in the apartments unattended. Now at 8:55 p.m., one of their friends by the name of Matt was the first to do the rounds on checking on the children. He went, he checked on the children, he came back, reported everything was fine, and they continued their dinner. Now at 9:05, Madeleine's dad, Jerry McCann, went to go and check on the children, and he claims that when he went to check on the children, he recognized that the door to the bedroom in which the children slept was a little more open than they would typically leave it, but he didn't really think much of it, as when he looked into the room, he saw the twins sound asleep, he saw Madeleine sound asleep, and everything seemed to be perfectly fine. So he kind of just forgot about the fact that the door was a little bit more open than it should have been, and he headed on back to report that everything was a-okay. Now, on Jerry's way back to the restaurant from the apartment after his check, he ran into a tourist on the resort who he was friends with by the name of Jeremy, and they began to talk for a little bit. Now, at the same time that Jerry and Jeremy were talking, one of the other friends from the table or from the dinner by the name of Jane Tanner was actually walking to go and check on her children. Now, she claims that she saw Jerry and Jeremy speaking together, but they never saw her. However, Jane claims that up the street, she saw a man carrying a little girl in his arms who appeared to either be asleep or something of those sorts. She was kind of hanging in his arms. She was blonde-haired, she was young, and she was in pink pajamas. But she didn't really think much of it in that moment. Because, I mean, they were on vacation. People often carry their sleeping children from one place to the next. I know that when I was a kid, even if I wasn't asleep, I would pretend to be asleep so that my parents would carry me in to my bed. So she didn't think much of it. It wasn't really an alarm for her whatsoever. And she returned back after checking on her children. The only thing that she found slightly odd about the situation was the fact that he appeared to be walking away from the apartments, not towards the apartments. But I mean, other than that, she just assumed it was a father carrying his child. So at 10 o'clock p.m., Kate McCann went to go and check on her children, and she claims that when she got in to the apartment building, everything was very silent. It seemed to her that everything was okay until she noticed that the door to the room of which her children were sleeping in was slightly more open than she or Jerry would have left it. However, she wondered if somebody who had checked on the children previously had left the door this way, so she went over to go and close the bedroom door, and that was when the bedroom door kind of slammed shut as though a gust of wind had caught it. Now, when Kate McCann opened the door, she realized that the window to the room in which her 3 children were sleeping was open, and that was when she adjusted her eyes without turning on the light to realize that Madeleine was not in her bed. Now, her initial instinct was that Madeleine had perhaps gotten up and went to look for Kate and Jerry, as a small child would in a foreign place at 3 years old. So she went and looked in their room, and Madeleine was nowhere in sight, and Kate McCann says she instantly knew her daughter was taken. Now, I'm going to insert a clip here of Kate McCann recalling these moments leading up to realizing that her daughter had been taken. And then I want to tell you guys something slightly strange about this circumstance.
What was the exact moment, let me ask you, Kate, when you realised Madeleine had gone?
Well, I went back to do a check at 10 o'clock. And I went through the patio doors at the back. And I listened for a minute in the living room, and it was all quiet. And I just noticed that the door to the children's bedroom was quite far open, and we always leave it just so it's slightly ajar, just to let a little bit of light in. And I thought to myself, did Matt leave the door open at 9:30? Because Matt checked on them at 9:30. And I thought that must be what happened. So I went to close over the children's door, and just as I was about to close it, it kind of slammed, as if like a gust of wind had shut it. So then I thought, did I leave the patio doors open? So I just checked, and they were closed. And then I went back just to open the door again a little bit. And just as I was doing that, I just glanced at Madeleine's bed, which was by the wall, and it was really dark, and I couldn't quite make her out. But I just kept looking for what felt like minutes, thinking, you know, where is she, you know? And it seems daft now, because normally you think I'd put the light on, but it's that inbuilt thing of don't wake the kids up. And then I looked and realised she wasn't there, and then I thought, so if she'd gone through to our bedroom, that'd explain why the door was open as well. So I just quickly looked in our room, and she wasn't there, and that was probably the first time that panic started to build. So then obviously I ran back into her room, and just as I did that, there was the curtains, which were closed, just kind of blew open, and as they did that, I noticed that the shutter was up and the window was open.
And what did you think in that moment?
I thought someone's taken her.
You went down to tell Jerry straight away?
Yeah, I basically quickly whizzed around the apartment in about 15 seconds. I don't know why. In my head, I was just thinking if someone's been in and she's cowering somewhere, I guess is why I did it. And then I just flew out through the back, down the stairs to the restaurant. And as soon as their table was in sight, I just started screaming, Madeleine's gone. And then they all jumped up and were running over saying, she must be there, but obviously I knew.
So in that clip there, one thing that Kate McCann forgot to mention is that when she immediately ran back to the tapas bar to tell everybody that her daughter had went missing, she actually left her 2 sleeping twins in the apartment building. And when she ran down there, the initial thing that she said to her friends at the restaurant were, they took her. And she kept repeating that Madeleine had been taken. Now, a lot of people who I've seen theorize about this particular case find it extremely strange that you would initially assume that your child had been taken when there was an open patio door. I mean, I understand that Madeleine was very tiny. She was 3 years old. She was about to be 4 years old, but she was 3 years old. So I completely understand the fact that she was a small child and her opening up that door may not have been the easiest task, but I mean, you kind of have to or you'd like to, think of other options as to what could have happened, that maybe she's still somewhere on the resort rather than having been taken. And on the contrary to this, something that I find alarming is if you instantly knew that your child was taken, why on earth would you leave your sleeping twins in the same apartment that your child was just abducted from? It's all so strange, but then again, sometimes when you're in shock, I understand people react in completely crazy ways and you might make an impulsive decision just based off of the fact that your child is missing. But I mean, I just really wanted to mention that to you guys because that's a big flag when it comes down to some different theories as to what a lot of people think took place and happened. They called the police at approximately 10:13 p.m. and the police arrived at 10:30. But you guys have to remember as well, this is 30 minutes after Kate McCann realized that her child was missing. Time is of the essence. Time is ticking. And so right then and there, police dogs show up and volunteers began frantically searching for Madeleine McCann while her parents remained in the apartment. Now, much like the John Bonet case that we had looked into not too long ago, the apartment in which the McCanns were staying in and in which Madeleine was stolen from hadn't been deemed or closed off as a crime scene. So 20 or more people were running in and out. I mean, Kate McCann had really caused an incredible scene like any parent would if their child went missing. So people were going in and out and looking everywhere for Madeleine, and they never deemed it a crime scene initially, closing it off. Now, the police brought in a sniffer dog, which ended up picking up on a couple of different locations. The sniffer dog actually picked up on behind the bed and in the parents' closet, but it also picked up on the trunk area of the McCanns' rental car. Now, cadaver dogs or sniffer dogs are essentially known as human remains dogs and are trained to smell death. Therefore, some people believe that Madeleine McCann had actually been killed inside of the apartment or on the resort premises. So the fact that so many people had come in and out of the McCann's apartment before it had been deemed or closed off as any sort of a crime scene may have been extremely detrimental to the solving of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Now, on top of that, roadblocks had not been put into place until 10 a.m. the next day. Border guards were not informed for hours, and they did not put out a global missing persons alert for 5 days. So all of those factors mixed in with the fact that the crime scene, the potential crime scene, may have been tampered with were just all, very overwhelming things for the public to swallow, in the sense of maybe things would have turned out differently. Maybe they would have discovered what happened to Madeleine had, things been followed properly. Now, an Irish couple named Martin and Mary Smith actually came forward and said that the night of Madeleine's disappearance at around 10 p.m. they had seen a man carrying a blonde little girl around age 3 or 4 with pink pajamas, and she had very, very pale skin. And they said that they saw him carrying her towards the beach. Now, this kind of coincides with what Jane Tanner had said, so the authenticity of Jane Tanner's statement of seeing a man carrying a little girl in pink pajamas really sparked the police's attention. Now, Martin and Mary Smith described the man as not looking like a tourist, around 5'7" to 5'8", and in his mid-30s. The police searched non-stop for this man, but it was all very, very unsuccessful, as they never found the man described by Martin and Mary and Jane Tanner. Now, the McCanns became suspects fairly quickly, both to law enforcement and to the public. However, they were later cleared by police of anything to do with the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. But despite being cleared by law enforcement, many people still believed and believe to this day that Kate and Jerry McCann had something to do with the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Some people think that some sort of an accident happened and they tried to cover it up by staging an abduction, while other people think that perhaps maybe Jerry McCann had given Madeleine something in order to help her stay asleep or to put her to sleep while they went and enjoyed their adult dinner, and perhaps she had had some sort of allergic reaction to it or an overdose. And when Jerry discovered this on his rounds, they made a quick decision to I don't know, dispose of the body or something of those sorts, and that perhaps the man that Martin and Mary had seen was actually Jerry McCann. Along with this theory, some people believe that there's a possibility that the friends of the McCanns have been in on it, that none of them really wanted to get in any sort of trouble. So Jane Tanner had actually described what she had seen of Jerry McCann in order to coincide with any sort of a story that anybody else, like the Irish couple, may have came forward with, and that Jerry had never actually been talking to Jeremy when Jane Tanner walked to check on our children, that it was more of an alibi, so to speak. But on the opposing side, for those who believe that the McCanns are innocent, some people just believe that Madeleine had actually wandered off and met a tragic fate. I mean, the patio door was unlocked, but like I said earlier, Madeleine McCann was only 3 years old, just about to be 4. Could she have gotten out? There is a possibility, but it's difficult to say. Some people think that due to the strict routines of the McCanns and their friends, somebody had caught on that there would be a 20 to 30 minute window between when somebody would come and check on children, that they started to observe, they timed them, and they abducted Madeleine based off of the fact they knew that for 20 to 30 minutes children would be alone. And this kind of leads into the theory that perhaps Madeleine was stolen by a couple who couldn't have children, or she was sold to a couple that couldn't have children, or that Madeleine had been abducted by some sort of pedophile. There are so many theories. I mean, the fact that the place was unlocked, that children were unattended, the idea of an abduction is not so far-fetched, but there are certain holes in the McCann story that lead people to believe that they played some sort of role in the disappearance of Madeleine. I'm going to insert a clip here of what Jerry McCann had to say when he was asked if he had killed his daughter, Madeleine.
Did you kill your daughter?
No, never. And, you know, there's nothing with any logic that could, you know, you would have to start with why, you know, how, when, who, and there's just simply, you know, the answer to any of these things is there's nothing to suggest anything. So, no, that's an emphatic no.
So I guess what he's trying to say from this clip is that he would need some sort of a motive to have killed his daughter, or some sort of a reasoning, and there was none, so it's kind of an outrageous claim. I truly, from the bottom of my heart, have no idea what happened to Madeleine McCann, but I do want to read you guys something that I found as to what the server of the McCanns and their friends had to say about the night of Madeleine's disappearance. So he said that the group had made a special arrangement to book the same table at 8 p.m. every night so they could sit outside, 50 meters from where their children lay sleeping. He told how the arrangement was widely known by the workers at the restaurant who thought it was strange. Now, very briefly, I do want to say if it was widely known that the children were alone for that span of time, it really isn't so far-fetched that somebody caught on and went and abducted her. This case just blows my mind. But then, he then added the apartments are all quite close to the pool, but there are trees in between so you can't see them from the restaurant. Even though they were checking on their children every 20 minutes or so, there was still a lot of time they were left alone and someone could have gone in and taken them. And then he was quoted saying, "When you think back now, because the routine was so set in stone every night, if somebody had been watching the group, they definitely would have been able to work out what was going on and choose the right moment to take the child." He says, "Once I realized what had happened, it struck me that the arrangement had been pretty strange. They were obviously wealthy people. Why didn't they just put all the children to bed in one apartment and pay the 15 euros per hour for a shared babysitter?" So the McCanns have been asked this multiple times because they were both doctors. They definitely had money, and they say that they had made the decision to do what was best, or what they thought was best for their children. He then said, "The night of May 3rd had been just a normal night. Then it all became madness. We were beginning to wind down at the restaurant and I had been clearing some tables. I went into the kitchen for a few minutes, and when I came out, I saw that the McCann's table was totally empty, except for the older woman. I think she was a mother of one of the friends. She looked scared. Then I heard all the shouting and screaming coming from the apartments, and my colleague told me a child had gone missing. After that, it was chaos. People were running around the resort shouting for Madeleine, and we all started to help looking for her. I've never seen anything like it." Here's where it gets interesting and why I chose to read you guys this. He said the only time he remembered Miss McCann going to check on the children was when she raised the alarm, and said that it was usually only the men of the group who carried out the checks. His testimony contradicts some aspects of what the McCanns have said about that night. So I found that to be interesting as kind of an outside source who had been there, what he had seen and witnessed. Well, that is basically the gist of what happened leading up to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, and just a few of the many, many theories people have accumulated over the years as to what they think took place that night. I personally don't know what to think. My mind goes in one direction and then all of a sudden it goes in the other, and I'm just so torn as to what could have happened to Madeleine McCann. But what I do know is she was an absolutely beautiful little girl. She was only 3 years old, and it is such an incredibly sad tragedy that her life, in whatever aspect it was taken from her so abruptly. Well, you guys, this is the point in the video where I ask you guys, what do you think happened that night to Madeleine McCann? Do you think there's a chance that she is still alive? Some people do. Do you think that she was killed? What do you think happened? Talk it out below. Please, please, please be kind to one another in doing so. And I really look forward to hearing what you guys think of this case, because it's one that just blows my mind every time I do research into it, and I try so hard to comprehend what could have took place, but it's just so incredibly difficult to pinpoint. If you guys are new to my channel, or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my videos, I would absolutely love it if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button. I post a ton of videos, so I don't want you to miss when I do upload. And please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. I love things like this. I'm definitely excited about this series to talk about, discuss, and bring awareness to missing persons cases or unsolved crimes across the world. So definitely let me know if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until next time, I love you.